Chances are there's a small graveyard somewhere in your home. Maybe it's a guitar collecting dust in the corner, untouched for months. A pile of language learning books you bought with excitement but barely cracked open. Or a coding project sitting half done on your laptop. And whenever your eyes land on them, there's that subtle sting of guilt. Society has plenty of labels for this. They say you're flaky. They say you lack grit. Or the classic, jack of all trades, master of none. The story always unfolds the same way. You begin with a surge of passion. You devour information eagerly. You're convinced this time, this is the one. And then, right when it starts to demand something real, the excitement fades. You lose interest. You stop, and your attention shifts to the next bright, enticing thing. After repeating this cycle for years, self-criticism creeps in. You review your history and wonder, why can't I stay committed to one thing? Why do I always quit? But today, I want to present a different lens. One that's gentler and far more grounded in science. It's easy to believe that being a dabbler is a flaw. But in truth, you share the very same foundation as a brilliant polymath. You carry the knowledge instinct. Your hunger for novelty and curiosity runs high. The gap between you and a master isn't about personality. It's about strategy. It comes down to how a specific region of your brain has been conditioned. But to tap into that potential, we first have to understand the glitch that makes you walk away too soon. Let's begin with how your brain processes new information. Cognitive scientists refer to this as the knowledge instinct, the drive to reduce uncertainty. However, your brain operates a bit differently. It's less concerned with simply possessing knowledge, and more obsessed with how quickly it's gained. Your brain is extremely responsive to what researchers call reward prediction error. Here's what that experience feels like. When you dive into something new, take photography, for example. Everything feels fresh. The learning curve is steep. You move from knowing nothing to knowing something at lightning speed, because the rate at which you're absorbing information is enormous. Your brain rewards you with a flood of dopamine. It feels intoxicating, like falling in love. The world suddenly seems full of promise. But this is where the trap lies. This is the novice high. Then, you reach the point where you grasp the fundamentals. You understand how the camera functions. You comprehend exposure. Suddenly, the novelty fades. The curve begins to level out. You've entered the plateau. And for your particular brain type, that's when the dopamine cuts off. Immediately, this is the crossroads. A master pushes through this plateau because they're searching for a deeper structure beneath the surface. A dabbler, however, stops here. We tend to label this as laziness. But true laziness is a refusal to act at all. You're not refusing to act. You're refusing to act without fuel. Your brain is experiencing dopamine withdrawal. At a subconscious level, it calculates that the effort needed to master the final 20% no longer justifies the reward. So you step away. But let's pause for an honest moment. A harsh reality check. Are you stopping because you truly mastered the skill? Or because it simply became difficult? A dabbler quits at the first real obstacle. Their ego gets bruised, and they retreat. That's fear. And the reason that fear wins is because a particular muscle in your brain hasn't been strengthened. We often speak about grit or willpower as though they're mystical personality traits, something you're either born with or without. But neuroscience tells a different story. Persistence is physical. It resides in a specific brain region called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, or AMCC. Think of the AMCC as a muscle inside your head. Research shows this area activates when you do something you don't feel like doing. If you enjoy the task, the AMCC stays quiet. If you dislike it but push through anyway, the AMCC lights up. When this muscle carries weight, it grows stronger. When it's neglected, it weakens. For a dabbler, the AMCC often resembles an underdeveloped muscle that can't even lift a bottle of water. Each time boredom or frustration surfaced in the past, you quit. You set the weight down. So now, even the smallest inconvenience, a challenging chapter in a book or a puzzling line of code, is enough to trigger a decision to give up. It's like asking someone who has never run to suddenly run a marathon at full sprint. Naturally, you crash. That sensation of weakness isn't a character flaw. It's muscle atrophy. The encouraging part? This region of your brain is plastic. It can strengthen at any stage of life. Research on superagers, older adults who retain remarkable cognitive sharpness, shows that their AMCCs are just as thick as those of young adults. Why? Because they spent decades facing challenges. They kept lifting the weight. So even if you're young, your willpower muscle could be weaker than that of a 70-year-old who's endured a difficult life. How do we change that? We send your AMCC to the gym, but go easy on yourself. Just like in a real gym, you don't walk in and attempt to deadlift 500 pounds. You'd hurt yourself and give up. What you need is progressive overload. Follow the rule of the 15% push. When you're working on your new hobby, and that familiar urge to stop appears, the moment the dopamine fades and frustration creeps in, don't quit right away. But also, don't force yourself to grind for another 4 hours. That's too heavy. Instead, push just 15% further. If you intended to read 10 pages and feel like stopping at page 3, read to page 4, then stop. That small stretch, that brief moment of doing what you didn't feel like doing, is the repetition. That's how you thicken the AMCC. It's straightforward, mechanical, but over time, that fragile muscle grows strong enough to carry you across the long, dull plateaus. That's how a dabbler transforms into a master. Now I need to pause for an important distinction. Some of you watching may have ADHD, and for you, the guidance shifts. If you have ADHD, your dopamine system and executive function operate differently. Trying to power through the plateau using only the AMCC strategy can be ineffective, or even damaging. It can result in burnout and shame. For the ADHD brain, internal grit isn't enough. You need external scaffolding. You need task visualization, breaking your project into tiny, visible steps so you can clearly see progress. You need time visualization, using timers so the task doesn't feel endless. You need body doubling, working alongside someone else to borrow their focus. And you need gamification, adding artificial rewards to compensate for missing dopamine. As I explained in my earlier video on job crafting, you must design your environment to support your brain. If you suspect you have ADHD, use these external systems to support your AMCC. Instead of labeling yourself as weak, there's one final obstacle to confront: boredom intolerance. The plateau feels unbearable because your stimulation baseline is set too high. We live surrounded by supernormal stimuli: TikTok, Instagram, sugar, video games. These deliver effortless dopamine floods. Compared to a 15-second clip, learning a language or practicing an instrument feels painfully slow. Your brain has been tuned to high-intensity noise. So when you attempt the quiet, focused work required for mastery, it feels suffocating. You have to intentionally address this boredom intolerance. You need a dopamine reset. This doesn't mean retreating to a monastery. It means practicing stimulus control during your work sessions. When you sit down with your hobby, put your phone in another room. Turn off the music. Let yourself experience the boredom. We usually interpret boredom as a cue to stop. But in reality, boredom is the blank canvas necessary for deep encoding. It's the sensation of your brain shifting from consumption to creation. If you lower the background noise in your life, the signal of your new skill becomes clear again. So here's my proposal. We're approaching a fresh start. I want you to commit to a 6-month challenge. Choose one interest. Just one. It doesn't have to define your career. It can be anything, and commit to staying with it for 6 months. Forget about becoming world-class. The goal is simply to experience the deliberate practice phase. Your mission is to reach the plateau. Feel the dopamine drop. Notice the weakness in your AMCC. And continue anyway. Use the 15% push. Train the muscle. Discover your baseline. Once you prove to yourself that you can push through the dip, you unlock a new identity. You'll realize that dabbler was never permanent. You're becoming a polymath in training. And once that muscle is built, you'll be ready for the next stage. For now, download the free guide linked in the description. It includes the interest audit and the specific protocols for strengthening your AMCC. Choose your one thing. Lift the weight. In the next video, we'll explore the polymath strategy, how to design a career that embraces your many interests, instead of forcing you to narrow down to just one. I'll see you in the next one.